On Saturday, Gloucester Township Day was scheduled to be here at Veterans Park in Clementon, New Jersey. But after several decades, it was postponed because of what happened here last year when hundreds of teenagers took over and caused chaos. Well, a new state law aims to stop that.
You know, there are a lot of headlines that you could take from the recent presidential election of Donald J. Trump of 2024, and a lot of people have been highlighting that in California and in the state of New York, most of the counties move significantly to the right, and in fact, in some of these locations, every single county, at least to some degree, voted for the evil orange man than in previous years. However, I think one of the headlines that people tend to overlook is that we have a new potential swing state that is going to come into play according to the numbers for the Republican Party, and that of course is the state of New Jersey. One of the most democratic states in the entire union a few years ago was actually the closest, even closer than Virginia, I believe, to flipping red than in the previous years. Now, of course, people will say, Sean, they used to have Chris Christie, their governor ended up only barely beating the gubernatorial opponent for the Republicans in his previous election, but the fact is New Jersey flip-flopping on a statewide level on their governorships is not unusual, but trending towards the Republicans in such a dramatic way in a presidential election, that is absolutely remarkable, and part of the reason why is because New Jersey is sick of what the Democratic Party is offering, and a perfect example of what I'm talking about is this law that was passed that you would think when you see the headline is passed in order to fight off these kind of mobs in Florida or in Texas or in some red state that also deals with these teen mobs taking over random areas and getting into crazy brawls. But again, what do we see right here? The state of New Jersey is stepping up to pass this legislation, and we gotta give them credit where credit is due, because many a New Jerseyan a few years ago would have called this evil, white, and racist, because make no mistake about it, these mob attacks are wildly disproportionately being perpetrated by black teenagers. But New Jerseyans said, absolutely not. We're going to get this straightened out. We shouldn't have to cancel an event for the first time in decades, but this is the situation that these teens have put us in, and we are fighting back. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
We left early, right as we started to see things starting to get a little uneasy.
Kelly Benigno, born and raised in Gloucester Township, is upset her family won't be attending Gloucester Township Day this weekend. The carnival-style event is a major fundraiser for college scholarships for high school students. Today, the governor signed the new so-called public brawl law, fighting back against those who organize large gatherings leading to chaos and anyone causing trouble during them.
So one of the things that I often call out from Democratic politicians and the news media is the use of euphemisms in order to obscure what is actually going on. It's one of the reasons why I always emphasize teens whenever we're talking about teen crime, because in reality, what we're hearing from the local news media is a perfect representation of that. This law seeks to bar large gatherings of youths looking to disturb events, when in reality, what we're talking about is black teenage mob violence, or black mob violence, because a lot of these perpetrators are well into their 20s when they are committing these crimes. That is what we're seeing in the B-roll right here. Make no mistake about it. And yes, this is a major problem in many locations across the country, and we have seen time and time again not only these instances be documented, but of course local areas having to shut down events just in anticipation of what occurs each and every year. I mean, you can't go past a Memorial Day weekend or 4th of July weekend, or God forbid a Juneteenth weekend, without a bunch of people getting shot, a bunch of this piss poor behavior. And again, it is all motivated by the fact that we have a society that refuses to engage with these problems, that refuses to acknowledge the problems coming from a certain community and how they impact these types of events. And unfortunately, the cost of ignoring these problems is often paid in the loss of businesses, the ending or canceling of these types of events, waste of police resources, because if they weren't committing the crimes, we wouldn't have to deploy so many police officers there. And of course, it's paid in blood. And that's exactly what happened in the previous year when they tried to do this celebration.
Prison, nah, but send them somewhere to make them sit down and be more educated about things that are going on. then that sounds better. But this prison, man, there's too many people in prison now.
So they interview this guy on the street right here, and they ask him, is it okay to send the ringleaders of these riots, or as they call them, gatherings, to prison? And he's like, prison? Nah, what you need to do is send them to some kind of facility where they could get educated on what they're doing so they understand that it's bad behavior. And I would just point out, it sounds a lot like he's describing a prison or juvenile detention facility, but the fact is, his whole assumption about why these kids are committing these crimes, why these teenagers and young adults are doing this kind of piss poor behavior is absolutely crazy, and honestly more disrespectful to them than holding them accountable for their actions. I mean, does anybody really believe that you can become a teenager in the United States of America or a young adult in your 20s and not know and need to be educated on the fact that when you gather with 100 of your buddies and you start beating, stabbing, and killing people, breaking into places and looting, that's an issue that you just were unaware of was wrong, that you need some new education in order to correct that behavior? That's absolutely insane. And what's even more insane, what's even more asinine, is that I actually remember what the purpose of this event was in the first place, which is to raise money for scholarships to send high school kids like the ones doing the rioting to college at no cost. So this is for education. Believe me, they're not starved for education. They're not starved at all. They're having fun. They're enjoying themselves. You can look at the joy across all of these teens' faces and you realize that they're not going to have their problem solved by being sent to an after-school program. They're not going to have their problem solved by having themselves in a midnight basketball program or whatever stupid program that the left wing is advocating for. Normally, when they interview people on the street, they seem to do a good job. They're an accurate representation of public sentiment. But this man right here, and I'm hoping, by the way, that the local news media cut him out of context and there was a broader point that made more sense, not a good representation of the feelings of the people who are actually victimized by these criminals. Again, you don't need to be educated to know that rioting is bad. You're not completely unaware of that. They're having fun. They enjoy violence. Again, as Colin Flaherty said multiple different times, the reason it's called the knockout game when they sucker punch people and laugh is because it's played for fun. That's the motivation behind it. The reason they do these mob takeovers is because they enjoy doing it. It's not that you have to educate them or arrest poverty. I didn't see poverty in that crowd. Poverty didn't do the stabbings. And if you do think it's poverty, then please give us a description of what poverty was wearing. I want to know what kind of sundress she's in, and we will deploy the police to arrest poverty.
Gloucester Township Day last year ended in fights and officers arresting several teens. On Memorial Day weekend about a week ago, there were more troubling scenes in shore towns. That led to dozens of people being arrested and the boardwalk in Seaside Heights being shut down for a short time. Investigators say there were 3 stabbings over 3 days.
I mean, again, 3 stabbings over 3 days, and you have people talking about how these kids need to be educated. They just need to be taught that the stabby stab person is not actually the good person, because a lot of these teens, when they watch like a Michael Myers movie or Scream or some other kind of slasher flick, they don't realize in their brains that the person who's doing the stabby stab in those movies, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, hacking people up with the chainsaw, that's actually not the hero. That's actually not the protagonist. That is the bad person. Murdering people or trying to murder them is not considered good in our society, and this is something that we can fix with education. Absolutely absurd. You know how to fix this? Lock them up. You find the ringleaders of this, you find people participating in this horrible behavior, instead of giving them the 2020 Black Lives Matter treatment where you give them a slap on the wrist and you thank them for protesting for civil liberties, you show them consequences. You show them that this behavior will not be tolerated, and guess what? That's going to be the best damn education they ever get in their lives. And by the way, even if you don't teach them that lesson, even if they don't get deterred, even if they don't get rehabilitated, when you remove them from society, when you incapacitate them, that will also solve the problem, because they quite literally will not be able to go to these events. But those are just my thoughts. That's me being a little bit crazy about this situation. We should be investing in midnight basketball so these teens, these youths that are stabbing each other, learn the lesson that stabby stab, no good, no bueno behavior.
We need to get back to normalcy. And I think this bill, this law, is a step in that direction.
New Jersey Assemblyman Dan Hutchinson sponsored the newly signed bill calling for stiffer penalties for being involved in these chaotic scenes. Those who are caught organizing any flash mobs or gatherings can face up to 1.5 years in prison.
Hey, I want to throw on a mask. I want to participate in that disturbance. Guess what? You now have 1 year in jail. So there's a difference. Prison, if you set it up, 1 year in jail if you participate.
So look, I 100% agree with Governor Murphy signing this, Democrat, and I also agree with this co-sponsor right here proposing and pushing this bill and the sentiment that he expressed right there, which is if you're going to organize these events, if you're going to rain terror on our communities, guess what? That's a felony. You're going to spend up to 1.5 years in jail as a consequence for that behavior. So of course, I ended up looking up Dan Hutchinson to see what political party he was affiliated with. And of course, you guys already know right now that this man is of the Democratic Party. And by the way, I'm so happy to see that. I'm so happy to see Democrats talking like this, because guess what? This is how we move the Overton window back to where it needs to be. It can't just be the Republicans pushing, but in areas that are historically Democrat where they realize they're losing ground, them coming out and being more rational and more sensible is what we need in our society in order to improve our entire country and in order to improve our local municipalities. So great job by this guy sponsoring this legislation. Strong stance, really appreciate it, really respect it, and I hope that the New Jersey Democratic Party ends up moderating significantly in order to deal with the oncoming onslaught of Republicans in that state, because make no mistake about it, if trends continue, this will be a purple to red state going forward.
Some at Veterans Park in Clementon want the consequences to include moms and dads of teenagers. They say they just want to enjoy gatherings safely.
If they're underage, I firmly believe that their parents should be held accountable, because it starts at the home.
A feeling of security, they say, hopefully returning with this new law.
Now, even better than the Democratic representative speaking that strongly about this particular issue is the attitude and the sentiments of the residents in this particular area, which is that the parents need to be held accountable for these crimes because these problems start in the home. And first and foremost, I just want to say to this lady and to everybody out there in my audience, she actually means parent, singular, as in single mother, because typically, statistically, this kind of behavior doesn't come from two-parent households. It comes from single mother households. Again, more likely than the two-parent alternative. But of course, I want to know what you guys think about all this down in the comments below. What do you think about New Jersey Democrats, of all people, stepping up and cracking down on black mob violence? And do you think this law will actually allow them to have legitimate outdoor gatherings, have a good time going forward? And do you believe that your local area should follow suit in order to stop this from happening? Again, all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about New Jersey, addressing a serious problem. Till next time.